The new Obi-Wan Kenobi show was really good and I want to talk about it. I'm still relatively new to the Star Wars world, seeing as how I've only seen the 9 main movies, The Mandalorian, and, well, now this. Also like a couple of clips of Rebels, but like that's about it. Even with all of that in mind though, I still think that I've seen enough that I feel like I know what I'm talking about to an extent. As I'm recording this, the show has wrapped up its first and more than likely only season, and whether or not we'll get a season 2 is still very much up in the air, but I kind of doubt it. Regardless, what I want to talk about is something that only hit me within the last episode of the show, and that's the way the show handles trauma. Specifically, facing and healing from past trauma. I really like the show as a whole, but I think it all really clicked for me at the very end with the 3 central main characters. Obi-Wan. This man has lost literally everything. His brother, his friends, his master. He lives on an unknown desert planet working a job that he clearly isn't very interested in, but he has to work, otherwise, well, how is he gonna eat? And because the Empire is still growing with power, he's seeing remnants of his past everywhere he goes. The aforementioned dingy cave that he lives in, I think, is a great representation of that, actually. It's dark, dank, there's barely anything in it. Only him, just to live, sleep, and eat and wallow in his sorrows. Living an aimless life with seemingly no purpose. He doesn't even go by Obi-Wan anymore, he's just known as Ben. He doesn't use the Force anymore, and he hasn't used his lightsaber in 10 years. He doesn't have any friends, and anytime someone tries to talk to him about his past, he just ignores it and tells them to move on, without realizing that he himself hasn't been able to do that. And then something from his past comes back to contact him and give him a purpose. And through his adventure with Leia and fighting Reva and fighting Anakin on multiple occasions, and also finding out that Anakin is alive, whereas for 10 years Obi-Wan thought that he just left him back on Mustafar to die, not only does he learn to embrace who he was as a person and as a Jedi Knight, he then not only learns to forgive himself about the past mistakes that he has made, but for also the mistakes that he couldn't stop or control. And by the end of it all, in the very last episode, it's wonderfully represented with his final fight with Darth Vader. He gets a bunch of rocks thrown at him and literally is being crushed by the weight of his own past. In his dire moments, he starts thinking about all the things Anakin has said to him, all the things Darth Vader has said to him, but only when he starts thinking about Leia and Luke, thinking about the future, does he finally realize it's okay to move on. That constantly thinking about the past and what you've done and the mistakes that have been made won't help or change anything. What can help is living a more productive life by thinking about the future and helping those around you. Over the course of this series, he grows from this old man named Ben who just is jaded and tired and cynical to the old, lovable, kind, and caring Obi-Wan Kenobi that we've grown to love. Not only from the prequels, but also to Allen McGuinness's version of Obi-Wan that we see in Rebels and A New Hope. I love this build-up that we get to Darth Vader and Obi-Wan's final fight. He lands on this deserted planet with seemingly no life, and as the audience, we know that he's going to be okay, but think about it in this way. Imagine that the sequel trilogy and the original trilogy doesn't exist, and this show comes out like a couple years after Revenge of the Sith. In this weird alternate timeline, as far as we know, Obi-Wan, and in his mind, he is going to die. But in his mind, that doesn't matter. He has saved everybody on that ship, and so long as they get to the planet that keeps them safe and keeps them secure from Darth Vader's plans and the Emperor and the Empire, to him, that's more than enough. And seeing Anakin's face under Darth Vader's mask, I imagine really hits the final nail in the coffin for Obi-Wan. Anakin is dead. Unfortunately, you can't save him. And so at this point, why try to? Instead, focus on the future. Focus on Luke and Leia. The past is impossible to change, and it's very hard to acknowledge your own mistakes and trauma. But by doing so, not only will you go to be a happier person for yourself, but for others around you. Obi-Wan literally says this to Reva in the final episode.
By showing mercy, you have given them peace. You have honored them. Who you become now. It is up to you.
And speaking of Reva, her character in this show I think was extremely well handled. What I love is that she's kind of a mixture between what Obi-Wan and Anakin in this show are going through. Literally the first shot of the show is the Order 66 attack that we see in Revenge of the Sith. She was there. She was at ground zero. She was once a youngling, aka a Jedi, just like Obi-Wan. But after Anakin kills all the younglings, it leads her on this long and arduous revenge scheme that she has because she knows that Anakin is Darth Vader. Which in hindsight makes so much sense. She's force sensitive, why would she not be able to sense the fact that these two are the same guy? Her only goal throughout the entire series is to please Anakin, to become the Grand Inquisitor, also that she can kill him and I guess become the Emperor's new apprentice in a sense? Because in her mind, she thinks that that is what's going to heal her childhood trauma. That is what's going to solve all of her problems. But after getting humiliated by other Inquisitors throughout the series and by Anakin himself, she grows more and more frustrated and is filled with more and more rage, just like Anakin was in Revenge of the Sith. After she literally loses everything, the one thing she has left is to try and go back to Owen and kill Luke, because what else is she gonna do? She can't go back to the Death Star, so she might as well go all the way back to Tatooine to fix the one mistake that she made at the very start of the series by realizing that Owen lied and actually is taking care of Luke, who is force sensitive, and that Owen also knows Obi-Wan. But because she's already so damaged by Darth Vader, by her fellow Inquisitors, she's so weak in comparison to everybody else that she gets her ass almost handed to her by a couple of farmers. But right as she's about to get to the very end of her goal and kill Luke, only then does she realize that she literally became what she wanted to kill. She ends up in Anakin's shoes because why wouldn't she? She literally is about to kill a young, force-sensitive child. But only then does she not only find redemption in not killing Luke, she then returns him to Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, leaving her Sith lightsaber behind and moving on towards a new life. Whether or not we'll see her in any other piece of Star Wars content is still undecided for now. I really do hope that at some point we get to see a fast forward of her life after or during Return of the Jedi to see what her perspective was once the Empire fell down. I love how after 6 episodes of her chasing around Obi-Wan, they both connect at the very end of the series by resolving their own separate traumas related to a similar event, that being Order 66. They both bonded over the same event an episode prior, and how they both bond over the fact that their trauma is caused by the same person. Anakin. What I love that this series does, what I've loved about every single one of the Disney Plus shows so far, the ones that I've seen at least, is that Dave Filoni, Bryce Dallas Howard, Jon Favreau, all these people know their stuff. They know how to carefully interconnect everything into the sequels, into the original trilogy, into the prequels, and this series with Vader is no exception. Deborah Chow and the gang clearly know what they're doing with how to handle Vader's character. This is still only 10 years after the Battle of Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith. We see a younger Darth Vader, an angrier Darth Vader, one who's not afraid to raise his voice more often. It's a stark comparison to the original trilogy, but it works. From Revenge of the Sith onwards, Anakin is fueled by revenge and anger. As far as he knows, his brother, his best friend, lied to him, betrayed him, and left him to die. Of course he would go out looking for Obi-Wan to find some sort of sense of closure. It especially doesn't help that he's still being manipulated behind the scenes by the Emperor. His emotions and his wants are being toyed with. So even after multiple fights where we see Darth Vader literally burn Obi-Wan's skin and literally throw nothing but rocks and mountains against him, by the end of it, he feels as though he's finally able to move past his trauma, but not in the most healthy way. With Reva and Obi-Wan, they're moving past their trauma so that they can better themselves. With Anakin, on the surface, it seems like he's trying to grow as a person for himself, but in reality, all he's trying to do is get revenge on Obi-Wan so that he can prove to himself and the Emperor that he is still worthy enough to be the Emperor's apprentice. This is something that's shown off in the Darth Vader Star Wars comic books, and other pieces of Star Wars media in general, where we see the Emperor try to replace Anakin with different people that he feels as though are worthy should the time ever come that Anakin tries to betray him. Then Obi-Wan pops back out and literally defeats Darth Vader single-handedly with nothing but rocks and the Force in his lightsaber. The Darth Vader suit is a metaphor for how Anakin feels constantly trapped by the dark side, by the Emperor, by everything around him. And once Obi-Wan slashes at the Darth Vader mask and we see a brief look at Anakin's face, for a moment we see two brothers reconnect through very little dialogue. There's this overwhelming sense of melancholy and sadness between the two. For just a brief glimpse, Anakin feels a bit more free since he sees Obi-Wan with his true face. with his own eyes, with his own voice too, but you can still kind of hear the synthesized James Earl Jones voice kind of snoop in every so often, almost representing that even though Obi-Wan is apologizing to him and is sorry for everything that has happened to him, Anakin still feels a large amount of the dark side within him. And that's it, the fight could have gone on for even longer, but Obi-Wan chooses to leave, seeing how Anakin is already battered enough. Once again, he has the high ground, but this time, he chooses to leave without causing any more damage, because he knows that he's already caused enough. And similar to Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is just left there, by himself, damaged and bruised, screaming Obi-Wan's name. It now makes every other appearance of Darth Vader that we see in the original trilogy that much stronger, especially in A New Hope. Because now we don't just see two brothers fighting in some overly dramatic battle, we see two hardened warriors having a sparring match. I feel as though it's purposefully similar to that scene that we see in Twilight of the Apprentice in Star Wars Rebels. With much different circumstances, yes, but it's all based around the same group of people. And now after the series, it just makes this one line from Return of the Jedi hit even more so.
It is too late for me, son.
And it makes his redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi even stronger. And how at that point he's finally able to move onward after he's redeemed himself and forgiven for his own mistakes, just like Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan and Anakin are on opposite sides of the spectrum here. One rediscovers who he is and is able to move onwards, meanwhile the other is still very much trapped within his own body, unable to move forward, and is demanded and forced to repress those feelings by higher powers. Reva is in the dead center of that spectrum. She's a mixture of both Obi-Wan and Anakin. Her goals and aspirations are similar to Anakin's, but her origins and outcome are most similar to Obi-Wan. And the side characters that we see within this series help everything tie together into one big beautiful knot. Most especially Leia and Luke. Okay, now I say Leia and Luke, but Luke doesn't really have much screen time in this series, which in my opinion makes perfect sense. We already know how important this character is going to be. He's the star of 3 of the 9 Star Wars movies, arguably 4 of them. Plus he's appeared in different TV shows and games, and at this point we kind of get how important Luke is to the whole narrative. With Leia, however, we never saw what her childhood was like in comparison to Luke, living with the Organas and such, and how she met Obi-Wan in the first place. Which, by the way, her interactions with Obi-Wan in any of the episodes was especially really cute, and also just good character building for both her and Obi-Wan. I'll admit that it was a bit on the nose how some characters were always like, oh, you know, she's gonna be really important in the future, but it's almost deliberate. Again, we as the audience know how important Leia Organa is going to be and how important Luke Skywalker is going to be. But these characters, especially at this time, they really don't know. Which is a positive thing I can say about really any of the other pieces of Star Wars media that come before or after the original trilogy. Stuff like The Mandalorian and this show help tie everything together without making it too messy, if you know what I mean. And either way, I know for a fact that Carrie would have loved the actress who played Leia in this show. I really love how everything was just tied in a knot together at the very end and how everything just clicked in terms of its themes and what it's trying to say. A great watch, and in the long run, I hope that future Star Wars shows take notes. This is all unscripted and was just something I wanted to do for the fun of it after watching the final episode. And so I hope that you all enjoyed it, and who knows, maybe I'll make more of these in the future. But for now, bye-bye! Also, one last thing, I love how they got one more of these before the show ended.
Hello there.
Yeah!